Let's talk about American megaliths. Now, there's quite a few megalithic sites in the northeastern United States, and there's a lot of controversy about them, and particularly from mainstream sources who say they can't possibly be megaliths. I disagree. Now, I haven't examined. I think I saw one up in the Hudson Valley in New York, and that's years ago. But I haven't had a chance to properly explore the megaliths in New England. But I've only seen websites, and I've looked at videos of them, and there was even quite an interesting episode of Ancient Aliens recently, and they covered. It was probably the premise they put in that the Druids were connected to spacemen. You ignore all that stuff, and they came to America with their magic powers and built the dolmens and stuff all over the Northeast. Well, I mean, the Druids had nothing to do with the building of the megaliths in Ireland and Britain. Those megaliths existed for thousands of years before the Druids and the Celts. But aside from that, you just turn your brain off and you examine it for the beautiful photography and the occasional very good truth bombs that are dropped in that show. And now, surprisingly, there is quite a lot of truth bombs dropped in it, in between all the fluff that they cater to mainstream American alien stuff. But they're absolutely, some of them, quite a lot of them are absolutely the real deal. From like my casual off ground, looking at them, knowing what a megalith is, knowing what a cairn is, and some of them are unmistakably chambered enclosures built from in classic megalithic style construction, including the large things like orthostats on the back walls that it's classically you see in like Irish or UK chambered court enclosures and mounds. There absolutely are, and there's the ones like in Sentinel Hill and in Massachusetts, and there's plenty of them around Connecticut and so on. Now, there is a story that Om script was found on a stone. Well, I've looked at that stone. It's definitely some kind of proto-lettering, but it didn't look like Om to me. But nevertheless, it definitely showed something. There's a stones that have been found with carvings on them in Rhode Island and Massachusetts, and it just goes on and on. Now, one of the reasons that convinces me, apart from the fact that they look like the real thing, is the sense. This is an important thing when studying megaliths anyway. Is the sense of aesthetic and theatre within the landscape. The ancestors were had a very acute understanding of how to cite a structure, whether it be a court cairn or a long barrow or a stone circle or a standing stone, a menhir, or a ring of circle of stones. There's a sense of, when you get there, you see that this is meant to be here. This is supposed to be in this spot, and they're usually in an area where the landscape around them is sympathetic or provides an interesting view, unless of course forests and stuff have grown up in the years in between. But I'm thinking about even the one that they call the Druids Altar in the Phoenix Park in Dublin. I'm doing a video here, Marilyn.
Sorry.
You're all right. Or I'll talk to you later.
You feeling okay?
Yeah, I'm a lot better now.
Okay.
You're looking well yourself.
I'm not feeling well.
Oh, okay. I'll talk to you later. Anyway, yeah. So there's a sense of theatre and what's the word? Drama within the landscape, and it's unmistakably one of the traits of a megalithic site. I'll give you examples. Like I was just talking about before my friend Marilyn came along. The Druids' altar in the Phoenix Park in Dublin. Now, that's built at the top of... If the trees weren't there, and the house beside it wasn't there, the Gatekeeper's Lodge, and you were back in, whenever they said it was built in the Bronze Age or Neolithic Age, you would have been afforded a phenomenal view of the Liffey Valley right across the valley. There's a lot of that kind of thing goes on. You go to West Kennet Longbarrow in England, and you can at the top of the hill, and you see right across to the Silbury Hill, and down towards Avebury, down towards there's a sense of theatres everywhere in the landscape. You get the same in Stonehenge. There's the Salisbury Plain stretches out before you. You have the same Newgrange, the Boyne Valley. You have here Queen Maeve's Cairn on top of Knocknarea Mountain, the Mountain of the Moon. You have even the Carramore ones. You're surrounded by. There's a sense of theatre, and that's because I think that they place these things, and even I saw them in Sri Lanka. There's a sense of not only are they placed towards the astronomical alignments because they're astronomical, but also they're cited, I think, in terms of the landscape's effect on the astronomical thing. So you might have had whatever the ancestors called the constellation of Orion. Maybe they had their own similar kind of name, like the Giant Man or something, and maybe it lined up with the opening of a chamber on a certain date, but it may have also had vanished or risen behind a sacred mountain. That's near, that kind of thing. This is why the stone killers gave up on the destroying all the stone circles in Aberdeenshire in England, in Scotland, because they realised in the end that the stones were only part. I think Julian Cope in his book The Modern Antiquarian says this, that they realised that the stones were only part of the megalithic spiritual infrastructure. The rest was also the mountains and hills and trees and rivers and everything around it. And that's what the American ones have. They're not just ice. Yeah, if they were root cellars, you don't build a root cellar in the middle of a forest. You can't grow nothing there. And I would imagine whoever built them, if there was no trees, if there was trees, then they would have cleared down the trees to site certain astronomical alignments. And Hugh Newman in that show, Ancient Aliens, shows that that they definitely had alignments with solar events. So. And that's classic groundwork. And then you go outside and you would look, well, would they have been able to see such and such the sun on such a day, or the moon or the stars? And you always see that they can. There's always there might be a gap between two mountains. For instance, I've been working on this rath, this circular enclosure, a very old one too, only about 200 yards from my house, on top of a hill again, and it faces the Ox Mountains. Now, I have been studying this thing for years. There's also stone in the middle of it as well. So I suspect that there was also a megalith at one time in the middle. It's now buried or lying down. I did that by picking a thin steel bar down and found a large stone. And underneath it, I didn't dig it up, but I could tell the size of it. So there's probably a menhir in the middle of it. Across directly from the hill that it's sited on is a gap in two mountains that's like that. Like a valley, like that kind of thing. And so I'm convinced that there was an astronomical alignment or a cosmological alignment using that gap in the mountains, and I haven't been able to find it yet. I go out when the weather's on good nights around certain times of year to see if there's a specific star or constellation that closes the horizon, but I can't be there all the time. But I'm convinced there is something. That would probably I'd probably have a better chance if I plotted that on a star map type software program in terms of the geographic coordinates precisely, and then see if there's anything from that point on. But that's what convinced me that along with the fact that they look like what they're supposed to be, they're unmistakably dolmens. Now, a dolmen is the interior in most cases of the chamber interior of what was a mound at one time. Most of the Irish ones are anyway, but some of them are not, and some of them are definitely standalone. And for what was mentioned in that, the diamagnetic qualities that actually improve agricultural yields, Philip S. Callahan put in his books, and the soil conditioning or seed conditioning elements within the electromagnetic and diamagnetic aspects of these dolmens, these monuments, and the American ones are full of that. So now, bearing in mind that they're legitimate, let's say they're legitimate 100% megaliths in North America. They're the real thing, right? So where did they come from? Who built them? Well, I think it's a bit kind of, when people say things like, even Lovecraft in his writings alluded to the fact that they were pre-Indian, pre-Native American, and he used to throw truth bombs in his writing, and he said that the megaliths on Sentinel Hill, some unorthodox people believe that they were built by pre-Native Americans, or pre-Indians as he called them. Now, I'm in two minds about this. I'll tell you why. Wherever you go in the world, you see megaliths that are very similar. You see dolmens everywhere. Like, a dolmen is everywhere, not just Ireland, not just Britain and France. They're everywhere. They're everywhere. And in Asia, Japan, and and then you have the smaller versions like the chambered cairns that end up like dolmens when they're excavated. I saw them at Iban Katwa in Sri Lanka. They look just like the ones you see in Sligo here. I've seen them everywhere. You see them in Portugal. Everywhere you go, America. So it's very easy to say, oh, it was the same race that went around the world building these. I don't buy that argument. The way I put it is sort of like the collective unconscious thing. Now, I don't know who built the megaliths in the America. I'm open-minded that it could have been Native Americans, or it could have been their earliest ancestors, or it could have been arrivals from Europe. We do know that Clovis people travelled across from Europe a very, very long time ago, from France, and made their way all across down the west coast of the United States, east coast of the United States. And there's loads of stories of Irish legends of the land across the sea, Welsh legends. That's not unfeasible. We know that they had in Bronze Age times very good boats, much better. Neolithic times even had good boats. If the MacManaman MacLear thing is anything to go by, the boat they found up on the Loch Foyle in Northern Ireland, it's now the National Museum of Ireland. Now that's so that's not impossible, but at the moment as it stands, I tend to think of them having been built by Native Americans who were tapping into the same element in the collective unconscious that Asians in Japan, Oriental people in Japan or China, Korea built their dolmens at. And it just was like something happens in the consciousness of humans, and they suddenly start to develop like certain things similar, and they might have developed archery all over the world at the same time. Even though interconnected tribes had nothing to do with each other on the subconscious level, maybe they were. And that's what I'm thinking. Until further evidence comes along, it's quite possible that early peoples from Neolithic or Bronze Age, British Isles and Western Europe made their way across to North America and built these megaliths. But I can tell you one thing. Regardless of who ever built them, you have megaliths in America. As clear as that. You don't have to travel to Ireland or Britain or France or Portugal if you want to see megaliths. You've got them. They're all over New England. And it's great to see people finally taking them seriously. And they should be taken seriously, because that's a real archaeological treasure you have there. It adds a further layer of historic foundation to the North American continent. And I think these things will actually appear more and more. And you never know, maybe the people who built them were the ones who built the Mexican pyramids, but you've got a progression of learning. You start off somewhere and you go somewhere else and you develop your skills. And it's always easier to build in warm, sunny weather than isn't cold, damp and wet weather. So that's why you have more highly developed megaliths when you get to landscapes that are, in terms of the refinements, into the aesthetic refinements. When you go to warmer countries, it's easier to build them for that reason. And so, yeah, America has megaliths. I'm convinced that there are megaliths, the ones, especially the ones in New England, the Hudson Valley. There's just too much evidence at this point, and it's a whole field of study that I think is going to explode in the next few years, and it's not going to just end in New England. You're going to start finding megaliths in Canada, in all parts of the United States, and they're going to be. It's going to revolutionize the whole thing. America is going to suddenly find that it's a much older place. North America, when I say that, I mean Canada and Mexico a lot, than mainstream had said they were. And you're going to find that you don't have to leave North America to find megaliths. You will have them there. So yeah, there you go. And if you live in the northeast of the United States, start hiking and enjoy them.